Podcasts are pretty common. So what makes the Uncommon podcast uncommon? Well, it's all in our name. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we at Uncommon Sports Group understand the unique pressures and temptations that come with a career in the sport industry. We provide uncommon training that helps you successfully navigate common challenges. Hit the follow button on this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Check out our website and become uncommon. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Uncommon Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and I'm excited to welcome Dr. Matt Huml, who currently is an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati, onto the show today. Dr. Huml, how are you?
I'm great. We're recording this early October. The weather is still enjoyable. The leaves are turning, so we can't really complain too much.
Yes, sir. It's beautiful here in Minnesota as well, so definitely thankful for that. And Dr. Huml, you teamed up with Dr. Elizabeth Taylor from Temple University to write a column on Sportico.com about why employees within the college athletic space are fleeing the industry. This is such an important and relevant topic for young people who are desiring to work in sports, and specifically college athletics, because the challenges of a career in sports can oftentimes be masked by the riches of a sport industry career. So I'd love to start by hearing from you, Dr. Huml, why you decided to conduct research on the college athletics industry and why it's important for young people desiring to work in sports to be informed on this topic.
Yeah, I want to get started by saying thanks, Noah, for inviting me on here to talk about this project and the research that we've done. As you mentioned, Dr. Taylor's been my longtime collaborator on this. We've been doing this for about 5 years. So going back to that, we had first met at a conference, or actually, I think she was applying for a job where I was working at the time, and we ended up talking that we were doing a lot of similar research. It'd be good to get connected and start working on that. And we ended up looking and realizing that there wasn't a lot of people doing research in what I'd call like human resources within college sport. There's lots in the traditional business or management focus areas, but not as much within sport. And we both kind of were already in the college sport context. Now, Liz was a former volleyball player at Division III. I was a former college baseball player at Division II, 1,000 years ago, it feels like now. But it's been something that we've always had passion in career-wise and research-wise. When I first got started doing my PhD, I was very focused on academics. My background was as an academic advisor. And so my research was really focused on that academic experience of athletes. What's it like going to school beyond just being an athlete? And she was doing a lot of looking into like female administration or female opportunities within there. She also potentially looked at, and she's gotten some great research background also within like alcohol awareness, sexual assault concerns, stuff like that. And so we ended up connecting and working a lot into this area. And so it's always been a passion for mine. My wife is a former college soccer player. College sport is truly kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis for what seems like now a long time.
Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Huml. And it seems, too, that just the college athletic space has grown exponentially over the past, say 30 years or so. And obviously the attraction for young people is to work in this industry, right? Like imagine working at Notre Dame or Auburn or one of these awesome institutions. And what's often missed is those challenges. And that's why I think this conversation and this research that you and Dr. Taylor did is so valuable, is it really shines light on the challenges that come with a career in college athletics. And I'd love to follow up with what you said there. If you don't mind sharing just the research process you guys went through and why having data on this topic is valuable.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go back because I did realize I missed out the young part of, or for young people going in. I think you really hit this on a lot of, thinking back when we're younger, a lot of us have aspirations of making it professionally, but part of that is that you need to take the step and play in college. And you mentioned lots of great universities. You said you're up in Minnesota, like University of Minnesota probably has thousands and thousands, maybe millions of kids in that area that dream of playing football or wrestling or softball or whatever at University of Minnesota. Or if it's not there, Could be Minnesota State Mankato, could be Bemidji State, it could be Winona State, it could be a lot of schools.
Yeah.
And we all, at some point, those dreams end for 99.99% of us. And some of that ends up being that the extension is, okay, maybe I won't be an athlete, but I can still be involved, whether that's on the management side, decision-making side, the coaching side, personnel. Maybe you realize education's your dream, but you can advise athletes. Maybe you're doing fundraising. There's lots of outlets. And it becomes that, okay, I can't be on the field, but I can still be a part of this. And that ends up being what one of the things that we're researching right now in calling, that you're really called to this profession. And I know that probably is relevant to this podcast being religiously based. As you can imagine, calling is based a lot on religion, of feeling that calling to a greater being, or for some people, just a calling to what they individually feel is what they need to do during their life.
Yeah.
And sport ends up being a strong connection to that. But the research process, going back, when Liz and I met in 2017, we decided to do this big employee behavior research in 2017. And so we sent a survey out to all Division I athletic department employees. And I can tell you that since we're updating the list right now, I've got over 46,000 names that will be getting a new survey from us in a couple of weeks. But our survey then probably had around that similar amount. We also probably had another 10,000 D2, 10,000 or so in D3. And so they all got that. And we had to go through the process at the time, way back when, to figure out what we wanted to ask them. But what this project that you're talking about, this Sportico article, was we were going through and we had done another project update in 2019. So just envision the process of, I have to go through and find everyone's name and their email, so that way when their survey comes out, it's saying it's addressed specifically to you and it says all the information. So I have to find all that information. Well, the nice thing is I have all that information from 2019, right before COVID happened. And I was like, well, this is great. Now I actually can go in. People are always talking about there's all these people leaving, but no one knows. Well, I have the names and the emails, and I can actually go in now, like starting this past summer, and actually find out, for example, like University of Tennessee, I have all the people that were there in 2019. So now all I have to do is go in and see who's still there.
Right.
And so it seems simple, but there was lots of complex questions related to that. But that was the kind of the crux of going through this. So I have all the old data. I'm able to include to what those athletic department staff directories look like now. And then I'm able to see what that turnover rate is.
Yeah, it's so interesting as well. No, I think this is such a cool thing to research, because it can be hard to have data for this kind of, how do you see the challenges within the college athletics industry? How do you see how many employees are leaving, the turnover rate? I think it does provide a lot of valuable information. And I'd love to even dive into that. You found that Division I universities have a 48% turnover rate, almost double the corporate and higher education expected turnover rates. And I found it interesting that Power 5 institutions had a lower turnover rate than other D1 universities. What were some takeaways that you and Dr. Taylor had from this data?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there of your Power 5 schools are your aspirational schools. So just like if you're an athlete and you get an offer from Arkansas State, but then you get an offer from University of Arkansas, probably 9 out of 10 of those recruits are going to choose University of Arkansas because of the brand, because of they're on TV, because your family rooted for them, whatever. There's much stronger associations there.
Yeah.
But there's also a resource question of University of Arkansas is going to have a lot more resources that they can throw into their athletic department. And part of that is they're getting a bigger return on that through TV money, revenue for people showing up, donations, than Arkansas State, or Northwest Missouri or whatever you want to look at as would potentially be in that area that would be comparable. And so it likely leads to more people staying. Now, another thing we've noticed on here, especially if we within across the data set, is football does have a big impact. If your football coach gets fired, which as we're recording this, I guess we'll keep this very Midwestern centric, but Paul Chris was fired at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It likely is going to mean that whenever Wisconsin hires their next coach, that there's going to be lots of other people in the football coaching staff that are let go. Yeah. They hire someone internal like Jim Leonard, maybe that means a decent chunk of people come back. But if they end up hiring someone outside, then it could mean that the entire staff is gone and not a single person's back, which again, you're talking about 50, 60, 70 people that might completely have to find new jobs and new people that'll be coming into University of Wisconsin. So football can have a big ripple effect even into the
Mm,
administration side for that. But I don't want to spoil too much of the stuff. But those are the big things that we know is Power Five, more
mm,
likely to stay, more resources, more people are willing to stick it out.
yeah.
Or maybe at the lower level, we're thinking that those people are looking for more Power Five jobs, but then less resources might mean more turnover.
Mm. Absolutely. And I think what's unique as well about college athletics is it's almost like a ladder of you start at the bottom, you climb to the top, and that's why these Power Five institutions have more stability is that is the top, right? And there isn't that reality of, oh, well, I'm at an Arkansas State and I want to make it to the SEC or want to make it to a Power Five. So it is interesting, and I think it's unlike a lot of industries. You think about, per se, medicine, right? And if you're at a certain hospital, you're maybe not quite looking to bounce to another better quote unquote hospital. That's not quite as much the mindset in that
Yeah.
industry, but it so much is in college athletics. So it's very unique in that way. And kind of a follow-up question here. Certainly, your findings found a higher turnover rate in college athletics as a whole than really any other industry. And I'd love to hear this. What are a few other reasons why that might be the case?
Yeah, I mean part of it is that I think the work environment within college sport is it can be very toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes to another finding that we have. We found that a lot of the top administration folks are still there. They haven't left. Like I bet if I looked at it's a little bit tricky in athletics because the department titles can be really wishy-washy, but
Mm,
if you have an associate AD or above, which would be like associate ADs, deputy ADs, executive deputy ADs, or whatever,
yeah.
and then the athletic director, I bet a lot of those people haven't changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet that retention rate is probably really high. And part of that is that those people have reached the mountaintop and they're being well compensated for their efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have quite a few people that they can delineate tasks to below them
Yeah.
that maybe the middle management, lower task people aren't, and they're still grinding. They're
Yeah.
still trying to make it work. And they're willing to take on more and more tasks because they view it and they're probably not wrong in that this is what it takes to move up.
Yeah.
And what you end up doing is you have a huge turnover rate at that lower level because those people are being asked to work 70, 80 hours, maybe at their peak, maybe more, and their pay is very low. And passion can take you pretty far, but at some point, we all have needs that need to be
Mm-hmm.
accomplished. And that
Absolutely.
means that you're giving up a lot less at home with your family, or maybe you're putting, we had people respond to our other surveys saying that they were deciding no longer to be married or pursue a partner because of how much their time was being committed to athletics.
Wow.
Or they told us that, hey, once they do find someone that they're going to leave the industry because it's not conducive to being successful there.
Mm.
And so it ends up being that you have to give trade-offs. It's like, hey, I want to pursue this career.
Yeah.
I'm still grinding my way to the top. I'm not there. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this until maybe I find other something that's more achievable. Or you may just realize you get burnout
Yeah.
and then you pursue a different career option. Like, hey, because I had someone reach out and said that they left being an assistant AD at a D2 school and started working third shift at Lowe's because they were getting like comparable pay, but their hours were constant. And it's like, man,
Wow.
that's a shock to the system that someone's doing third shift
Mm.
anything
Right.
instead of athletics, and they actually view that as a healthier work environment. And so
Wow.
these are the challenges that college sports going to have to accomplish. Now,
Mm.
the supply is always strong. Like there's always going to be eager people,
Certainly.
but at some point you're going to have less and less people that are going into the field, which leads to one article we talk about is like a brain drain that we're having.
Mm.
Some of our best people are leaving because they're finding more amenable fields that provide similar pay, but they're also going to go there, and you're losing those talented folks. Like we're seeing a lot of women that are getting started in college sport, and we're seeing less and less women move up the ladder, and it's probably
Mm.
because of the pressure put on the field and social norms of having kids. And how can you do that
Mm.
physically,
Yeah.
have kids, and then also try to continue working? So there are lots of negative consequences that could come down
Mm.
or are already starting to come down at college sport as an industry.
Yeah. Wow. And I think some of those challenges are so it's so hard to even hear that, right? Of like, wow, like somebody would prefer the third shift to that example. That's just like it's mind blowing, right? But to some reality, it does shed light on how real these challenges are. And I'd love to even follow up with this question. You did mention some, the individual that went to the third shift was at the D2 level. Is there a difference in turnover rate from the Division I universities to the D2, D3, or NAIA universities?
Yeah, there is a difference. So we noticed a big difference. The biggest difference was at D2, where D2 is
Mm,
actually at a much higher risk of people
mm,
of losing their employees. And so
yeah.
we talk about this as attrition rate or retention rate, but they have a higher attrition rate. They're losing more employees
Mm,
on average than D3 and D2. D3 actually saw a little bit higher. And I would make an argument of D3 is kind of more niche. There's lots of them,
yeah.
but they're traditionally in more rural settings. People
Mm,
that are choosing to live in these rural settings are probably less likely to move because they're comfortable working within that town. That could be a town they grew up in, or they have affiliation with the school
mm,
that's a little bit different. And
yeah.
there's also less pressure. So you aren't at risk of getting fired. Where I get it at the D1 or Power Five, it's kind of like, hey, um, we'll use PJ Fleck as an example. Like PJ could have a really successful year this year and he gets a lucrative contract extension, but maybe he has 2 bad years after that and he could get fired.
Mm-hmm.
Where at D3, you don't have that pressure. If you have a great year, they're awesome. Like that's great. You're
Right.
probably not going to get a contract extension, but if you have a couple bad years, you're not going to get fired either. And
Right.
so that's a stability can make a big difference. And I think we're
Very
seeing that
true.
at D3.
Yeah.
D2 could be just a pinch of resources that
Mm,
they don't have as quite as much stability at D3, but maybe their employees are looking more aspirationally about moving into D1 than D3 people are.
mm,
But their resources are also limited. And
yeah.
we're seeing and wondering if maybe D2 schools in general had a choice to make on whether to provide more resources to keep athletics afloat or not. And they decided against it. And now you're seeing that, yeah, their athletic departments in general, employee wise, saw less numbers because they started cutting back there, which means people got let go.
Mm,
And now they're probably still recovering, but they aren't replacing positions that they lost.
yeah. Well, it's so interesting as well. You kind of mentioned that how D3 is very niche in that way. And it's almost, if you are a young person trying to get into this college athletics space, you really got to think about, what do I want, right? Like, do I want to be involved in a university that may be in a rural town, smaller sports, but it's still there and I can still be a part of that. And I've even, met individuals that are at the D3 level who have a more consistent work-life balance, right? It's less pressure in that way. And so for some, that's even a great route to take because you have that option, right? It's not quite as intense as those Division I universities. But the reality is so many young people who get into this picture and imagine the Auburn or Notre Dame or Alabama, and it can be difficult to let go of that dream. So to your point, I can definitely see where those findings make a lot of sense. And a lot of this for young people is just processing, what do you want, and you have to weigh the checks and balances of the positives and negatives there.
Yeah, I think there's a big decision-making difference between someone that's pursuing a career as a Division I head coach or
Mm-hmm.
Division I administrator than there is at the D3 administration.
Right.
I think you understand going in that if you're pursuing the D3 model, that your chance of being so successful that you will aspire and become successful at the very tippy top of Division I is very
Yeah.
unlikely. Like Lance Leipold is being discussed a lot right now within football because Kansas is doing great.
Yeah.
But he was one of the extremely few where he was at University of Wisconsin Whitewater in football, and they were like extremely successful to the point where University of Buffalo hired him,
Mm.
and he was successful there. Now he's at Kansas, and those are very rare. And I think most of
Yeah.
those people, if they wanted to become the head coach at Kansas, would be working as a student manager within Kansas. Like you're
Mm.
electing to choose that
Yeah.
greater turnover rate
Yeah.
because of the carrot of Lance Leipold being paid multi-millions of dollars. Where I'm sure at Wisconsin Whitewater,
Right.
he probably was making about 100 grand or 125 grand or so, which is great
Mm.
in Whitewater, Wisconsin, but like nowhere near as whatever he's making in
Mm.
Lawrence.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to your point, it is so challenging, right? That is so rare. You never see that, and to make that jump, it's very difficult. But obviously, this is a problem across NCAA. It's not a secret, and especially with your research, it's obvious that this is a growing problem. I'm curious to hear, what changes do you think need to be made in universities to improve this turnover rate?
Ooh, oh man, where to start? I will say that I think the big thing is you need to view your employees as your assets.
Mm,
I think a lot of these athletic departments look at their employees as this endless supply. I mentioned this earlier.
yeah.
There always will be eager replacements.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of athletic departments look at their assets are their head football coach, their head basketball coach for men's side, and then each of them has some specialty programs like volleyball, baseball, depending what it is. And those are really the only assets they look at it. And then they're very top administrators. And then everyone else is kind of looked at as this replaceable,
Mm,
flippable, non-tangible thing. And I think that's the problem is you end up having to constantly lose these folks. As I mentioned, we're in that like 50% range
yeah.
for Division I turnover, that you're constantly having to find new people. It costs money to search. You also lose institutional knowledge when people leave. And it's not just about the 6-month employee leaving, it's about the 5-year employee
Mm,
leaving. That's running
yeah.
ticket sales or that's directing your marketing.
Right.
That you lose those people and they leave and you end up hiring someone else and you have to go through this huge learning curve of teaching them what's going on. And so
Mm,
there's the institutional knowledge. There's also value in retaining people and keeping people
yeah.
satisfied and what that can provide you in the long term for your organization. But the other thing is I think they need to be seeking out ways to improve the lives of their employees. And we have a paper that's under review, which will be, I think, really exciting on remote work, with a lot of us having to do remote work. Like we're doing this over Zoom right now, Zoom being a great tool. A lot of us have had to get used to over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Athletics has always been in person.
Yeah.
They've rarely provided any flexibility until they had to through the pandemic.
Hmm.
And to me, that's forced them to accept some trade-offs that ends up helping them. Like
Yeah.
we have data showing that employees found out that they were able to get their exact same responsibilities done, but also spend more time at family. And so I don't
Mm,
want to go too much into that because I know this isn't we're focusing more on this other paper, but we found that their work family conflict, the
mm,
conflict from work affecting family,
yeah.
went way
Wow.
down under remote work. But
Wow.
their family work conflict stayed the same, which means to me that they were prioritizing still all their family stuff.
Mm,
Family wasn't affected, but they were still getting all their work done. And so that was a big benefit that we found on that. And so athletics is going to have to think about what are these tools that we can use to help our employees. Remote work
mm,
is one of them. It's an easy one that a lot of people are set up to do. And so it's a question of you don't have to make it pure like 100% remote, but can we do a hybrid? Can we keep people at home? But if we have a late game, like Minnesota's going to be playing at Michigan State and a lot of people go to the game but don't come back until late. It's like,
mm,
how about we do a late start on Monday for all the people that were gone and lost time during the weekend?
yeah.
Like those are just little low hanging fruit
Right.
that's not going to affect you on that. And the big thing is just tearing down some of these barriers or constructs of we need to see you in the office. We need to know you're
Mm,
grinding really hard
yeah.
because we just know that those extra hours aren't providing any benefit, even though athletics thinks it does, or they think that mantra is
Mm,
beneficial for them. It's just not. And so that's the biggest thing is
yeah.
think of your employees as assets. How can we support them? And then finding these little resources here and there that can keep people satisfied and also improve their experience, their life experience outside of work.
Yeah. I love that, and I think to your last point about that mantra, right? That so many athletic departments have of the more your face is showing in the office, the longer you're there, the more hours you put in, equals the better job that you're doing, and that doesn't always align. That's not always the truth. And I think on top of that, there's so many of those little low hanging fruit things that athletics can do, right? So I think that that's an awesome view on it of there's got to be these changes. And I think this research is so valuable because not a lot of people understand what the challenges are that individuals in college athletics are facing, nor do they understand how serious this turnover rate and individuals leaving really is. And I think it does impact athletic departments when you're constantly changing people and there's a carousel of individuals. I think there's a lot of negatives to that. So the hope is that these changes do occur. But it's, to your point, there's a lot of things that can happen.
Yeah. And to kind of wrap that up, no, because that was great of It is. You just kind of have to chip away at this stuff. We're not expecting that this article is going to come out and everyone's going to act like they've seen the light and we're going to have go through massive culture change, widespread, and all that stuff. But
Right.
it is become you're just chipping away. Like this is something out there we get people discussing. We get enough administrators that see that. We got emails from even head ADs thanking us for putting this out. And again, it's this little. Maybe you get a couple university athletic departments that move the needle a little bit,
Yeah.
and then you put out another article showing that work hours aren't beneficial at all or are slightly negative, and then you put out this remote work benefit, and so suddenly maybe everyone finds something that they connect with and that moves the needle just enough to make a big difference on these employees' lives. That's the hope, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, certainly. And I think too, culture shift often comes from this kind of stuff, right? Research and hearing the voices of the employees themselves. So I think it's most definitely a step in the right direction. And lastly, Dr. Huml, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any advice that you'd want to give young people who are hoping to have successful careers in this industry, I'd love to hear what that advice is.
Yeah, lots of different things here. One would be if internship, if you can, or intern. Can be expensive. I get it. You're having to do something for free and it costs you money to live. So
Yeah,
if you
right.
can find a paid internship, even better.
Yeah.
But if you can afford it or swing it, do that. And the big thing is try in different athletic departments, try different experiences. Because I will say there's going to be athletic departments out there that have good culture, that support you in different ways,
Absolutely.
and then others that are terrible. We've seen on the results, like we see people that really lambaste certain experiences they've had, or we actually have had a lot of people respond saying like, yeah, once I moved to here and I have this supportive supervisor, it's been a world of difference. And so that can be the big difference. And so
Yeah.
find someone that's supportive for you as a supervisor. It's going to help you flourish. But also take advantage of the field in the sense of there seems to be an acceptance of moving around a lot. That can be to your advantage. Find a situation that works well for you and then hold on. That's the job to have.
Certainly.
And it's easy to say that you might get fired. Like obviously know going in that this can be very cutthroat.
Yeah.
But yeah, seek out culture, work experiences that are going to be healthy for you, and not just healthy for you now, but in the future. As a young person, I will say your life will drastically change every 5-10 years. And so you'll realize maybe what works great for you now might not be what works great for you in 5 years. And that's fine. Like go through those transitions. It's okay.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is when in the future you become a decision maker and you reach the pinnacle of this field, be that difference maker for the next person. See the things that aren't healthy for all of your employees in general and find a way to change that. And whether that's things that we're pointing out or the experiences that you're having in self are going to be the big difference makers. So those are the things to consider, or at least the advice I'd give for young folks.
Yeah, so well said. I love that last point you made too. I really think this generation of young people coming up in the sport industry is really going to shift the culture a lot. And I think it starts with honest conversations, taking research like this seriously. And then once you get to a point of leadership, to apply the things that helped you to other employees that are under you. So well said. I think the giving back mindset of being that difference maker is great. And I think the internship part as well, right? It's good to try different athletic departments to see, hey, what is it like, D1, right? Or what is it like D3? And just giving those things a try and seeing what fits you best and what gives you the most enjoyment. It's well said.
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Dr. Huml, thank you for your time today and sharing your thoughts on this topic. It's so interesting to talk through it. And certainly I hope it impacts all of our listeners.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the invitation. For anyone that wants to follow me, you can find me on Twitter. I think it's at Matt_Huml, HUML. If not, just type in my name and you'll find me as I'll pop up. And you can also shoot me an email. Yeah, this is literally what I do for a living. This is my research is fully on this topic. And so I'd love to hear from any of you if you have experiences that you think are worth sharing.
If you want to get involved with Uncommon Sports Group and the mission that we are on to help you navigate the sport industry as followers of Christ, apply for our academy on our website at uncommonsg.org. That's uncommonsg.org. Be sure to catch new episodes of the Uncommon podcast every Thursday at midnight Eastern Time, as well as the full video episodes on our YouTube channel. Until next time, we pray that you will strive to be uncommon by glorifying the name of God in whatever you may do. See you next week.